The Earley Show will begin after a brief word from today's sponsor, Answering Legal. Visit answeringlegal.com to learn more about our 24/7 virtual receptionist team.
I've been utilizing Answering Legal for my firm since 2015, and truth be told, it was a game changer for me. I can be anywhere, and I'm getting my phones answered by Answering Legal. A strategic partner, as I call Answering Legal, provides a great reward. What is that reward? It's time. Time for whatever I want to do. As a private practitioner, I would highly recommend Answering Legal to other private practitioners. Now, every call goes answered.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Earley Show, sponsored by our friends at Answering Legal. Today we have a real treat. This is going to be fun. We have with us today Greg Ward from the Ward Law Group. Greg is a really successful attorney and personal injury attorney down in Florida, crushing it. He's a guy we can really all learn from, so I'm really excited to talk with you, Greg, hear your story. You have a hell of a story. So to our audience, please, as always, sharpen those pencils. We're going to have a lot of writer-downers today, right? A lot of tips that Greg is going to share because he's had quite a amazing journey, right? And he's just getting started, it seems. Crazy success, a lot of respect for what he's doing. But I really just wanted to have you on because, you've had a lot of, massive growth and really relatively, you're not an overnight success. You've been working at this for a long time. But you have, really pierced certain levels that most attorneys don't pierce. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited to hear, from you. You and I met, we spoke at the PILMA conference last May or June. We talked about Les Mis for a bit. I remember that. And I liked your energy. I'm feeling what you're doing. And so I'm really excited to talk with you. So thank you for carving out the time. I really appreciate it.
Sure. My pleasure to be here. Thanks. I hope everybody gets something useful. You say it's a treat. I'm like, who's here? Because it's me. I don't know if that's a treat or not. And with Les Mis, it's funny, like, how your vision of yourself changes. I used to think I was, the young lover character. And now I'm the Jean Valjean character. It's like, as you get older, your perception of that particular musical changes. My daughter loves it. It's my favorite musical. It's great. So hopefully I can give you some Jean Valjean wisdom in this, and stay away from Javert, one of those. So.
Well, I'm excited to get into it, like I said. So we have, you and I. So I am very strategic on who I ask to come on to the show. I like to bring on people who I can relate to, right? People who have come from struggle, who have gotten through a lot of adversity and persevered through grit, just perseverance. And I'd like to get into that on the podcast. We got into that with, John Morgan, Ali Awad, just people who have been through a lot. And I put you in that camp of just like going through adversity and just having the stick-to-itness to succeed, notwithstanding all that. So that's what I'm a geek about this stuff. I love to talk about the business of law, the practice of law, how to do it better. We talked before we were recording, how to be a maverick, how to disrupt the industry, right? Mm-hmm. And so I also wanted to get you on because you're hustling, you're getting after it. And I am too, and I really get into that. So I'm really excited to chop it up with you. So, for those that haven't heard your story, could you share your background, growing up? What was it like? Mom, dad, any siblings? Would love to hear it.
Sure. Yeah. And first, let me plug something. It's interesting. You talk about the early struggle. And let me say this. This past weekend, I finished preaching at Trinity Church. If you go on YouTube and you look that up, you'll see that because it really gets into I have a whole hour just on kind of the story and the miracles that God came through for me. But I made a distinction at that teaching, and I want to start with it. And that is, you talk about grit, and grit is obviously really, really important. But as I've discovered in my life, I turn 52 next week. And what I've discovered is the grit gets you only so far. Because I started off, I grew up as, we talked about this before. I've talked about it on other podcasts. I was born in, maybe upper lower class or lower middle class environment. Mom had a substance abuse issue. Dad was kind of emotionally checked out. My sister got into heroin addiction at a relatively young age. She started drinking at about 14, 15, and then she started with heroin. I think it was about 17 or 18, serious heroin addiction, full blown by 19. And just the patterns of that was really destructive. And then I had my own issues. I had bullies picking on me, and I was, kind of chubby, and I had weird hair, and I just was awkward. And my mom had put a lot of stuff into my head. One of the things I also realized, growing up in these rough environments is, you get certain beliefs about yourself at a young age. And some of the beliefs that were kind of grafted into my brain were, we're poor, we don't deserve it, we can't afford it. Greg, personally, you're not creative, you're not intelligent. I mean, these are quotes from my parents. Yeah, like stuff like this and really what I look back on is they were trying to protect me the best way they knew how, because for them, the world was a very dangerous and scary place. My mom was put in an orphanage at a young age, and I probably had some terrible things happen to her there. And so I think she was just trying to protect me, but in protecting me, I think in some ways they can cripple you, your parents. And it's, and you have to, and I had a realization, thankfully, at a young age that like, this isn't for me. I'm better than this. And I just always had that feeling at a young age that, this is jacked up. Something's wrong here. It was incredibly painful, but it's like, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to show them, and every time somebody would say something negative about me, it really was an attitude of, I'll show you. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem with that, this is getting to the point about grit, like grit can get you so far. The problem with that is that's all ego, man. And so what happens is that will only carry you so far. So I thought, okay, if I grew up poor, I'm not going to be poor. I want to be rich, right? And my path to success was going to law school, and it was a weird road to law school, but I got into law school, did really well in law school, and said, I'm gonna get out and make good money and be successful. Never have to deal with the problems of my family. And the bottom line is, though, when you're that egotistically invested in your success and it's all about you, mm-hmm. and you want the status and the money and things, that can only get you to a certain level. Mm-hmm. Success, can be your enemy. And they say great is the enemy of good. I really believe that, because there comes a point in your life when you make enough money that you could retire, that you have a crisis. And sometimes it'll be a health crisis, or it could be a crisis of conscience or something. Mm-hmm. And if you're all ego, you're going to be saying, hey, you know what? I could retire now. I went through this. I had a retinal detachment a few years ago. And even with my incredible motivation and drive now to serve people, which is, we'll talk about that in a second. Like, I was like, you know what? Maybe I should just retire. Like, this is hard. It's hard. I love it, but it's hard. And so I had enough money to retire. I was thinking, should I retire? And I went back to my faith and really started reading the Bible again. And I realized that God has a lot more in store for me. And so I didn't do it. But the thing that switched for me from the ego-driven grit to the spirit-driven grit mm-hmm. was, when I hit rock bottom financially and spiritually. And then I kind of flipped the switch and realized it's all about the service that we can provide to other people. And so I'm proud to say now, going forward for the rest of my life, I'm going to serve others as best I can with the gifts that I have. And I know that I will be financially blessed if I continue to do that. So I like grit. Like, grit keeps me through, the hard times. But the truth is, now it is, the spiritual enrichment from serving other people that really drives me. And that's what has scaled me from, over, let's say, 10 million in revenue all the way up to, we'll be at 65 million this year. And that was over the last, I guess, sort of like 5 or 6 years, where it's really been, it's not about, that ego. It's about how many people can I serve well, and how much impact can I have in their lives. And when you think about that, and maybe that's an ego thing, but to me, it's like, I want to make them happy as I can make them. And, everything else works out great, I've found now.
So one thing I want to ask you about, because I think our story, our childhood really gives shape mm-hmm. oftentimes to where we end up, whether that be good or bad. So when I was growing up, there was a lot of bombs going off. There was instability, chaos, which a lot of entrepreneurs who are listening to this can relate to our story of, it wasn't always easy. And so like we embrace the challenge of entrepreneurship. Right. But like even though there were bombs going off and trauma unquestionably unfolding and imprinting on me, my mom was always like, you're going to be someone. You're going to do something. Did you mm-hmm. get that cheerleading? It sounds like no, but
but it was a mixed message. Like there was some of that too. Now I feel like I had an encounter with God at a young age where God is like, you're going to be something, and my mom would always say I'm special, but then she would do her best to like protect me in the destructive way of, we're poor, we don't deserve that. So it was a mixed message. What I find when you talk about the bombs going off, and I love that, because that is like, and you don't know when the bomb's going to go off. Like, and so I do feel like everybody who's successful who tells this story has a little PTSD.
100%.
And I see how it shows up in my life. Like, there's sometimes like I'm gonna I don't know how to act in a particular situation, and I'm working through that now myself. But that comes from mom. So the bombs are going off. But what happens is most of the time when the bombs are going off, right, you and me, and probably the other people who go through this, we can hyper focus and exclude the bombs going off and get something done.
Yeah.
Right. And so that, to me, that's a great gift from God. Like, and you see this with doctors sometimes, like, especially like medics, like the doctor, the battlefield doctors, and like there's stuff blowing up all around them, and they're hyper focused on, let me get this one thing done.
Right.
And so we have a skill like that, I think, based maybe from our trauma of our youth, that like, I've got to box this up and I can't let it affect my ability to drive something. We had a similar, when the law changed in Florida, like I was kind of paralyzed. We were hearing that they were going to amend it and it was not going to be as bad with the tort reform law that recently changed.
Really scary.
It was terrible. I didn't know what to do. And it was going to shut us down. The original law would have shut all the PI down. It would have capped Medicare at medical bills at 120% of Medicare rates. No one would have done any medicine. So it was bad. And then I had this like a spiritual thing where I said, it was a Saturday before the law was going to get signed that week. And I just said, I was waiting for them to amend it and not do the dumb thing that they did, which was make it, in effect at the time the law is signed. And so I just went back and we filed 1,400 lawsuits in 4 days, and it was, but I got that inkling. I'm like, bombs are going off. I said, I want everyone in the office on a Sunday. We took up butcher paper. We assigned all the tasks. Thank God we had software that allowed us to do this. And I had already done the software from COVID. And I said, listen, I will not think of anything else until every lawsuit is. And we triaged all the lawsuits, the good, the high policy, high value, high injury cases, and then kind of all the way through. And we just transhed. And, John Morgan filed, I think, more than 25,000. It may have been 125,000. I don't know exactly, but it was a lot. And, Florida went through the roof with filings, but we got it done. But for that, the bombs of my youth. Yeah. I don't know if I would have been able to hyper focus and do all of that and get those things done with all our staff.
Yeah, you talk about the medic, the doctor on the feet, in a war zone. When he's doing surgery, his hands aren't trembling. He's calm, and I think for better or worse, that was what I was sort of like stamped with or inculcated with. But I use that as a benefit, and being an entrepreneur. But I think both of us can relate to having a story. So a challenging story, but just back to your mom for one second, because I'm interested in that. Was your mom like trying to protect you to not get hurt in life, but she didn't want you to think too big because that was too scary to succeed on a big level, or no? Like, was she trying to protect you from harm, from disappointment?
Yeah, I mean, harm for sure. I don't know so much about disappointment, but definitely she was trying to protect me from harm. Yeah. Like my mother, I dated, ironically, one of my first girlfriends. Finally got a girlfriend. I got a job, got a girlfriend. My first girlfriend was the town librarian, and I mean, if you think about as a teenager, you're dating the town librarian. She was like not the little librarian, but she was the front desk counter girl at the library. She was a sweet girl, she's a good church girl, and my mom was very happy with that relationship because her family had lived in our town for years. They all went to the same church. We all went to the same church. I think if my mother had her way, I would live in the house next door to her, and we had this little tiny townhouse. So it was, and so I didn't have support applying to college. Like I didn't know what the SAT was. I didn't know about applying to college. I applied to 3 colleges because I knew 2 people were going to 2 colleges, and I applied to the University of Maryland where I really wanted to go. I took the SAT on a whim. Thankfully, I did really well on it. Thankfully, I have a good brain. My grades were pretty sucky, and I managed to get in. But there wasn't that support there. So I don't think she was intentionally trying to say, "Hey, lower your bar." Okay. She just couldn't conceive of what a bar was, like a high level of success was. And so, and then in the context of that, not knowing in the scary world, she's like, "Well, let's keep you safe here at home, where no one's at least gonna shoot you." Or something, I guess, or rob you, or whatever.
I can understand where she's coming from. I as a parent, I get that protective mechanism.
Yeah, me too with my kids, But I remember the lesson of my mom, so it's like let them fall down a few times.
Yeah,
and it bugs my wife a little bit because my wife is super loving, and she had a similar environment where she grew up, but she's super protective as a mom. I get it. I think the weak point was more my dad, actually, because my dad should have stepped up and been like, get out there. Like I even wanted to play sports at a young age. My mom wouldn't let me play sports because she was trying to protect me from that. And she was worried I was going to get hurt, and even my dad, it would have been good if my dad had stepped up and said, no, get out there and, get your bell rung a few times playing football.
Yeah.
That's where I think those issues play out.
So you said you got to college. You did well in college, I believe you said, right?
Okay, I flunked out of college my first year. Went
Okay.
back to my parents' house where my sister was in full blown drug addiction. Said I'm definitely getting the f out of here. Went back to college after a year, and then I buckled down in college. Like I really got serious, and then I went to law school after that. Yeah,
So I got serious sophomore year of college. When did you get serious?
that's about right. When I went to the community college. It was sophomore year. That's when because I had to tell my dad I flunked out of college my first year, and I remember him saying I'm disappointed in you, and that was the most crushing thing that I could feel. And at that, I was like Miss Scarlett O'Hara from Gone with the Wind. I will never be hungry. I'm like, I will never fail a class again. I was like, I'm in. I got a job. I started training for triathlons. I
Took
worked
off.
2 jobs and just rocket ship. Took off.
Yeah, I hear you on that. So then I believe you said in college you did well, right? Because you were
Yeah, I did. After that, I did extreme. I did
Right.
well in college, and then law
But
school was like,
law school. I think is when you were maybe top of the class. I think I
Yep,
saw some-
that's
okay.
right.
So law school, you were dialed in, right?
Mhm.
So you get out of. I think it's really interesting for a listener, right? This is where it's like you're getting started, right? Your bar card, the ink is drying. Take us through that journey. Where'd you go once you were barred?
Okay, great story. So I had this vision. I went to the University of Baltimore Law School where Peter Angelos, the owner of the Orioles, and he's a big PI lawyer. He was the most notable graduate. I had a great criminal law teacher, Byron Warnken, who recently passed away. Super hard worker, really intelligent, dressed really nice, fast talker. So I had a couple of these guys who I kind of envisioned would be success. And I had a feeling at that age that being a plaintiff's lawyer would be successful for me. But I knew that, to be sure, I had to go to the defense route. And so I applied for a clerkship in the Special Appeals of Maryland, which is the intermediate appellate court, and got a clerkship working there. And it gave me enough time I had some personal issues. I had to take care of my elderly grandmother who had cancer and things. And so I was living with her. So it opened up for me the possibility of that clerkship to apply other places. She passed away that year. And I applied to some big firms all over the country. I got a book by, I think it was it's Walton, I think was her name, who top places to work with a law degree. And there were 400 firms there. I applied to all of them and got a job or interviewed in Miami. And the firm in Miami was a very, very big litigation powerhouse. And I would be doing securities fraud defense pre-Enron. And it just sounded so cool, and it was super high end. And I get to wear a suit every day, and it's in Miami from Baltimore, and the people were cool. The guy I was working for, his name is Lou Murphy. He had a Starship Enterprise model on his shelf, and I'm like, this guy's cool. He likes Star Trek. So I was such a geek. I'm like, yeah, this is cool. So I'm going to go the defense route with the idea that I'm going to ultimately. And they were good people. They were and they had some prestigious cases, great clients. It was a hard road, but I liked that experience, and it was definitely, I got to wear the blue suits every day and feel like I'm the young successful guy, and I did well there, and I moved to Miami thinking if I moved away from Miami from my folks, then all of my problems would be solved, because sister's still in drug addiction, mind you, so that chaos is still happening in Baltimore. So I went to the big firm in Miami. And they immediately then sent me on a document review to Nashville for 9 months. So I was in a warehouse for 9 months, my legal career. Yeah. So that was brutal.
Painful.
It was brutal.
All right. So then you're probably not too happy at that moment, just pouring over hundreds of documents every day.
You'd be surprised. You talk about grit, man. I had a ton of grit. Like, I was like, this is great. We're working on this huge case. It's like, it's $100 million case. I got worked my way up in the associate ranks. We're doing document review. I got to meet some witnesses. To me, now it was exhausting. I ended up at the hospital once because I was working so many hours, and I got a little food poisoning, and I went to the hospital. I thought I was having a heart attack. Yeah. And then, and I just ground it out. But to me, it was exciting. I was sitting around a document review, was joking with my attorney, my fellow associates. So it was good, but it was grinding. It definitely was a grind. And I started seeing patterns. Like, I'm like, I've got this personality. I can't even like hold myself in. And, everybody else is kind of like, the pattern of the big defense lawyer, it's a stereotype for a reason. They're just this, they don't have this personality. Like, let's do stuff,
Oh yeah.
And so, I started seeing that maybe there wasn't a path there for me long term, because I'm just a different personality. They're very, very smart people. And I love that because they're super intelligent. I love the intellectual stimulation, but the intensity and energy that I had, it just wasn't there. Except the one guy, Joe Clark, the managing partner of the firm. And, he's a great guy, still is a great guy. and but he was a little cuckoo too. I think everybody kind of said he was cuckoo. He was cuckoo like me, so I thought it was great, but but he had so I thought, well, I'm gonna be managing partner or nothing, and so I started getting to know some plaintiffs lawyers who were a lot more like my personality.
So all right, so then you're kind of cutting your teeth. You're getting experience, right? Doing some it's transactional work, right? So at one point, so I know you meet your wife eventually, right? So and then she has a fantastic story. I'd love, I've heard that, but I would love the audience to hear about that. But is it she who had the idea of doing PI work?
Yeah. So there's a whole story in that 10 years of that, between that, starting my own firm, bringing in some other lawyers, that not working out, starting a bunch of businesses that failed. There's a whole bunch of stuff. And I'll tell you where I met my wife. I'll fast forward through the story, because there was what I thought was going to be success ended up not being successful for me. And I had a failed marriage before I'm married to my wife, and I had a baby with my oldest daughter, who's 17 now. So a lot of things went well, and then things started going bad. And my sister's heroin addiction came into full blown. My sister ended up dying from leukemia.
Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that was painful. It was 15 years ago, and still it's a bit raw. Then a year later, my dad was diagnosed with terminal leukemia, and he lasted a year. And then just like everything in my life just went just terrible into the garbage can. So when I met my wife, my wife now of, I guess we've been married 10 years, 11 years now, been together for 13. When I met her, and you've heard this before, I was sleeping on a couch, broke, a couple $100,000 in debt, failed marriage, multiple failed businesses, law firm on the decline. Dad recently dead, sister dead, mom.
How old are you at this point?
I was 38 at this point.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, I'm 52 now. So this was 14 years ago. 38. And my dreams of success were not coming together like I thought they would. And I started like a car dealership and a property management company, and that just, nothing took off. Reading a lot of books on success, reading a lot of books on business strategies and all those things, but just, it wasn't coming together. So I met I was drinking a lot, and I was in a bad spot spiritually too. And I met my wife, and, I'll fast forward the story. I shouldn't fast forward through the story, because this is really the important part, because I had a strong spiritual conversion with her. She took me to church, and I had an encounter with God at that point in my life, which did change my life. But to answer the question about the PI, I through a series of things that happened, I decided that I was going to leave the firm that I had started and go and start my own firm again, just me. And I didn't know if I was going to take any clients or not. Wasn't doing PI at this point. I'd done some insurance work, some bad faith work, but nothing serious. And my wife, who was this Cuban immigrant, said that she wanted to do PI and she wanted to help people out. And I got to know her story, which she was, forged in an anvil too, walked across the border at 14 with just a backpack and her baby brother. Her mom was put in jail, and she was sent to a foster home for a month. And then they just, when you would talk about struggle, she worked at a flea market selling mangoes, and socks. And she fortunately got a full ride to University of Florida. She got into law school. She really had a tough road. And she says to me, she's like, I want to do personal injury. And I remember, I don't know if it's a direct quote or not, but I remember the sentiment, which was, you go do your little PI work. I'm going to keep doing my contract and my shareholder disputes and that stuff, which was billable work. And I'm thinking that's the path to success. The first case she got in, she sent a letter. I sent a letter, right? She was admitted, but she didn't have a reputation or anything. So I sent a letter, and we got the first case we had with the first letter. We got a $50,000 tender, and I'm like, "Are you kidding me? I just made $16,000 with a letter, and I've been busting my hump on this billable work to make $16,000. It's a lot of work, you know what I mean? And you have clients complaining about the bills, and nobody ever appreciates your service, et cetera, et cetera." And I thought, wow, that's incredible. And so we got in one case, and then 2, then 5, then 10, then 15, then 20. And, I think by the time we got to 20 cases, I stopped doing billable work altogether and just said, we're going to do PI work. And then we started hiring people, and that was the foundation for that.
Can we go back to when you were 38? Because that interests me, because you were in a dark spot, it seemed
Super
like.
dark.
So so I keep thinking of grit the more I hear you and I relate to what you're saying. Did you think about, quitting? Did you ever lose hope that you would be successful when you're 30 and really struggling?
I was just trying to survive, man.
Yeah.
At that point, I'll say something embarrassing. You say, is there anything off limits? I will tell you this story. This is what I tell my people, and this is the honest to God truth. Like, it sounds so stupid, but I kind of fixated on the Daniel Craig Casino Royale James Bond. Like at that point in my life, because I found out that my ex, we split up under really bad circumstances. My business partners and we just couldn't reconcile. I felt betrayed, but it was obviously I was not a good partner at that time in my life. My family had kind of, all the problems with my sister, my father. So I put on the shell of James Bond, of Daniel Craig. And I know it sounds stupid. I was gaining a little bit of weight, but I got super fit. So I became a spitting instructor. Like I was just trying to survive. And so I adopted this personality of no matter what happens to me, I'm on a mission. And I don't even know what the freaking mission is, but I'm like, I'm just going to survive right now. And I just got to get through this. And I felt like I was going to get through this, but at the time I wasn't thinking I'm destined for great things. I was just, I was drunk a lot. So it wasn't really, what I mean? At that point I was, salving myself with alcohol. I was going out meeting people because I had spent years married and I went to Miami. I never met anybody in Miami. I'd never socialized in Miami. So I was going out to bars and things and, kind of doing that and not good stuff, but, and certainly not conducive to running a law firm. So for me at that point, it was just trying to survive. And I did that long enough where, when I met my wife now, I was kind of tired of that. I was doing it for maybe 8-9 months, maybe a year. I was kind of fed up with that lifestyle, but I wasn't thinking about success at that point at all. I was just like, I'm going to survive. I'm on a mission. Everybody's betrayed me. I'm all alone. I had no friends. Like my wife, when I met her, she's like, let's go out on a double date with some of your friends. I didn't have any friends to bring. I called this friend of mine from years ago. I hadn't seen him in years. I was like, hey, listen, I know you have a girlfriend. Can we go out on a double date? I swear to you, it's so embarrassing. And I just hope the transparency and authenticity is here. Like, I just didn't have any friends I could go on a double date with. My business partners at the time didn't like my girlfriend / wife. And she was my girlfriend at the time. They just didn't like her for some reason. And so it was really awkward to go out on double dates with them. And I had no other friends. So I'm like, I fake it. I fake having friends. And so I called this guy up and we went out on a double date. To me, it was incredibly awkward, but I acted like I just took it in stride. I'm like, hey, my buddy Chris, we haven't seen each other in a little while. Good to see you, bro. Hugging. And we went right back to, we're on a massive case together. We spent months together. So it was just, he was in Boca, I was down here, but yeah, so crazy. But I'm just trying to survive at that point.
You're kind of in a ditch and it's probably,
deep hole, bro, deep hole, not even a ditch. It was was straight down. It was bad.
But there's only one way to go up. But I'm telling you, man, that's mindset and that's real. A lot of people they quit at that point when they're close, when they're almost there. They don't even know that they're almost there.
Right.
That analogy of digging for gold and the guy stops and one guy shows
3 feet from gold. Right. Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. Yeah. I was thinking the same story. Right.
And that's real life. That's real. And so it's really good that you went up from that abyss.
Amen.
Now, so it sounds like, your wife, there were a couple settlements and then your perspective changed. You said, oh, what's this, this PI business? This looks pretty, more lucrative potentially. Right. And so take me through once you had the couple settlements, what did you and your wife do? How did you shift your mindset with business at that point, what you were doing?
Okay. Well, I was primed. You know how they say it's like an overnight success that was 20 years in the making? Yeah. I was primed for that. I just didn't realize it at the time. Yeah. I was ready to explode because I had so much pent up energy that just had accumulated from me sleeping on the couch and not living my purpose and all those things. So it was I had this radiation that was ready to just blow up. And, and so with my wife, I mean, it happened pretty fast. We got the first case and we'd hired a couple of assistants at the time. I had another settlement before that would give me some funding, so I wasn't worried about every day of surviving at the firm. So I had settled a bigger case, got a $100,000 fee on it, on an insurance coverage case. There's a whole story behind that, $110,000 fee. And we used that to buy our first advertising contract, which, didn't, and we were going to the churches and meeting people and stuff. And we were really I was super, super church oriented at the time. I still am. And so we got a case, we got a couple cases and it was 1, 2, 3, 5, 10. And I just started doing metrics and things and seeing, okay, here's the track, here's the amount of work we have to do. How can we scale this? And then I just my brain is wired to scale. Now I know a guy, Jay Henderson. I think you know Jay.
Good friend of mine. Use him all the time.
Great guy. We use his test for everybody we hire. And he tested me, and he's like, "You have a CEO profile. He goes, for Jay says, for me, meaning Jay Henderson, scaling, he's like, hiring 5 people would cause me great stress. For you, it's how do we build a system to hire 5 more people and replicate it and minimize the stress? Like, that's how my brain works. And so I really I started, just applying these talents that I had. I'd go to businesses and I'd find a great business that I liked, and I'd ask them about their training programs and their hiring processes and how much training they did and what their customer service philosophy is. And, kind of like what a lot of thought leaders do today. Simon Sinek is one example where he really studies what makes great companies great. I would do that just myself anecdotally to find out what works here, what doesn't. And I just started thinking and moving. And so we went, and you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that levels, right? And there are levels, and there are certain challenges that happen at each level of law firm growth and management. And I would like to touch on that for a second.
Sure.
When you talk about, when it's when you're up to let's say, I'm going to arbitrarily give a number that people have studied it may be 10, it may not be 10, but when you're up to 10 employees, you can run the whole firm yourself, right? It's just you. You are the systems and processes, right? That's every HR decision you make, every interaction you're there. You're sitting in the middle of your office. You've got people going around you, and about 10 is how much you can do by yourself. Once you cross over 10, you need to start having systems and processes. And when I say to the people who are between 10 and say 25 people, that's really where you're looking at checklists, right? You need to have checklists for quality control, because you're not able to supervise everything effectively. You've got to have delegation. You've got to have other people working for you. You probably need 1 or 2 more attorneys to handle those cases at 25 people. And then 25 to 50 or 75, it's a whole other level of things. You got to start building out infrastructure. Over 100 people, it's another level of infrastructure, and by the way, at each of these points, there's what Vern Harnish calls, and he's in the Scaling Up book and Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, he calls it the Valley of the Shadow of Death. So you go up to a certain level of revenue / employees and stuff. You're at 10, and then you will hire. And before the revenue comes in for that additional hires, you're going to go down, and then you go up to 25 people, and you get that worked out, and you're hitting revenue. You're cruising along. Most people stop either at 1, 5, 10, or 25. Like, once you're over 25, to get over 25, you got to push, and then you get 25, and then you start going down a little bit, and you have a little moment where you pucker yourself and say, hey, can I really do this? And then you take up and you go to 50, and then 75, and then 100, and then 150, and 200, and 250. About over 250, it's kind of all the same. It's just a question of scale. I'm not there yet, but that's kind of what I'm aiming for. And I built the structure now for 250 people. We should hopefully be there in 2 years, maybe 3, and have the revenue and everything else. And I should be able to scale beyond 250. With 250, I could really handle a lot of cases, right? Not everybody's as productive as they are, but massive scale kicks in at 250 employees if you do it right. So anyway, all that to say, you've got to develop new systems and processes and different, your orientation has to be different. Your mindset has to be different. But what Jay Henderson said about me is I have a CEO mindset. So I'm always kind of looking. Right now, I'm asking myself the question, how do I manage a $250 million a year company? Right? That's the question I'm asking myself. I told you I'm 65 million this year. How do we get to 250 million? That's not actually the question. How do I manage that? What do I look like? So I stopped drinking. I have a personal trainer that I travel with a trainer on a selfie stick, and every day I will not miss. I've trained 4 days a week, every week, with the exception of one time I was injured for the last 2 years. I have a woman who prepares our food. It's my wife's trainer. She cooks for us. I can show you this right here. I've got my rice cauliflower, my beets, and my bison meat right here. So people, I used to think that success was like the party lifestyle, the rock star lifestyle. It is not. It is super disciplined. I'm at church every Sunday. I'm making sure that, my friends are none of them, really drink or party. Like, we've let go of those people. I don't spend a lot of money on things. I have nice vacations. I do that. But, that's the sacrifices you got to make. If you think you're going to make $100 million a year and be partying, forget it. Now, I can go to a party once, but if I stay up past 11 or 12 o'clock at night, I'm wrecked the next day. So, I lose a whole day, and that's terrible. So the mindset change,
It's so interesting that you gave that sort of inside baseball perspective on scaling the ups and downs. It's not like, it's not a rocket ship, right? It never is. It looks like it maybe on a big graph, but really, if you look at it, it's like, right? Like peaks and valleys. And so that I wasn't really sensitive to that. I didn't realize at that level of scale that you have those downturns, right? Because maybe not a downturn, but a dip to catch
Yeah.
up with the growth, perhaps, right?
And it may not be, listen, it may not be revenue, right? It may be the number of employee problems, that drive your focus and your acumen and those sorts of things. You know what I mean? It's like, we all get fixated on revenue. Revenue is just the barometer. Profitability and revenue are the barometers of success. They're not the result, right? Don't ever think, and I've said this so many times, I'm going to say it until my last breath. Revenue and profitability are not the goal. They may be the result, but the goal has got to be the service you provide. The goal has got to be the people you serve. The goal is you got to have some other goal besides the money. Because as I said, when you're sitting on the couch, you have a retinal detachment or, a heart problem or something, you may want to give up once you have enough revenue, enough profit.
How close were you to actually retiring when you had that health scare?
I don't know, man. It was that I got depressed because with a retinal attachment, you have to sit face down for like 2 months.
Jesus. Wow.
That was brutal. That was the hardest thing I ever went through, was sitting in a chair. And let me tell you, my wife's freaking out because she had to run the firm. Like all of my friends, basically, I had 2 friends. I'll give them a shout out. This guy, Henry Castro, my friend Carlos. They were the guys who came to see me. They brought me a special chair to sleep in the middle of the night. I couldn't get anybody to deliver it, and I needed it that night. And God bless them. I love them. Carlos brought his pickup truck over. They brought it over in the middle of the night. It wasn't about the money that I could have paid them. It was just that they were there to help me out. And I will never forget that. Like those guys were there for me in that one moment of brutal vulnerability. But you have to sit with your face down. And all I could do at that point, I was so depressed, I just read the Bible. And reading the Bible through that, I realized that God still has a call for me. He still has a purpose for me. So I got to do it. But there were some days I was just like, why am I even dealing with it? So
tell me, so now, you've reached a level where, what's the end game, right? You must have that in your view, right? Is it 250 people? Is that sort of?
Well, I have a daughter who wants to go to law school. So, good news for that. And she has a personality very similar to mine. I've got 2 other daughters, one of which will probably go to law school. They're only 7 now, so it's going to be a while for them. My 17-year-old is getting ready to start college. I don't think I'm ever going to retire now. Listen, it could be if I get a brain injury, God forbid, or something like that. I may do it. But for me, I just want to serve people. I just want to serve people more and bigger and better and do a better job for people. And we just opened in New York, which is going really great.
Congratulations. It's awesome.
Thank you. And I feel like we're going to go throughout the country. I may not ever get as big as John Morgan. And I don't know if that would even be my goal, but because I always want to make sure that I'm just giving 100% service to the people who I'm called to serve. For me, so the next phase of my evolution right now, so I'm 52, I figure I've probably got another 10 years running a law firm. I'm looking to build out a executive suite right now where they can run the firm without me and bring up some lawyers into my organization, up in my organization to help support that. My wife is 15 years younger than me, so she probably could work a lot longer than I would work. What I really feel called to do now is to share some of this information with, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs. We're building a training center here in Miami. We bought a new office building across the street. I'm building out for 250 seat with full electronics for Zoom and everything, so we can do, because what I do find, I am called to serve immigrants. I know this may sound unusual to people, but I believe that biblically, like the Bible says several places, be kind to immigrants. You were, and they're talking to the Israelites, you too were strangers in the land of Egypt. And Jesus even tells us to be kind to immigrants. How we treat immigrants is how we treat him, right? It actually says that in the Bible. So for me, immigrants come here, like Jeb Bush said, immigrants come here not because they're bad, because they love their families and they want to. And so a lot of immigrants are here, first generation. My wife is first generation. I want to help those people start in business. I want to help other businesses grow in business. I have all the personal stories that I have, God loves you and wants to help you. And I want to help people align with their faith, because I think faith is super important in the business journey. And so we're already building out a training center where we can do, conferences and things like that. I'm writing a book on, on some of the struggles that you pointed out. In fact, I've got a lot more of the struggles in there, just to know people that there's redemption at the end of this. And, and there is joy and love and happiness and conversion, and transformation, I should say, at the end of your story. So that's kind of like what the next chapter is going to be. I haven't, fully written that script yet. We'll see where that goes. But this law firm started like this, so I got to believe it could be amazing.
Well, yeah, you clearly have energy, right? You're a very energetic guy, right? You're undeterred, even in the ditch, the abyss. You got out of that. So I'm 47, almost 47 next week, right? So I'm scaling. And there's days, Greg, I go home and I say to my wife, that's it. I'm going to burn it down. It's not, it's fast. And I talk to other entrepreneurs in the PI space. They're like, brother, I hear you.
Yep,
Do you have those feelings of like, it's not going as fast, it's not going as, I'm so frustrated. Just be done with it. I'm out.
So for me, the most painful parts of this practice were the betrayal by who I thought were friends. Right. Like those moments coupled with like, we really we don't lose many cases. So, we're blessed in that area. But like I've had friends who I thought were my best friends betray me, steal money from me, like straight up theft.
Wow.
Right. And then when I catch them and confront them and maybe fire them, when I fire them, like they go out and they talk to all of my friends and say how I'm a horrible person and it's all my fault. And I'm like, how is that even possible? You stole money from me, but I keep my mouth shut because I don't like to talk about stuff like that. So those are the moments where it's like, is it even worth it? And then my wife will get frustrated and overwhelmed because my wife is 36 years old now. I mean, she's running a 200 person firm too. Like this is a lot for her. I grew up, I went through that. She went through a tough story, but for me, I'm called to do this. Like she's the best marketer I've ever seen, right? She's amazing online, but she also is very sensitive and so she gets, hit some days. And those days I say, let's shut it down.
Yeah.
We can shut it all down. And she's like, stop. You don't mean that. Because she knows if I shut it down, literally 2 weeks later, I would just disintegrate. I would blow up because I have too much energy. I've got to like do something, So I know myself. But there are a couple days, man. There are some days and I still suffer. Like, even now I'm going through a really hard time with a person who I thought was a friend. And, it's a money issue. And I feel like it's a betrayal. They didn't steal money from me, but they definitely were talking bad about me that, I didn't support their cause the way I should have supported their cause. And, I've had to offboard that person, a friend. I've had to offboard that person, and so it's hard to find friends. I've talked about this in other podcasts too, where it's, when you get to a certain level of income, it's hard to find friends because you hire all your friends on the way to whatever $1 million is. And then the next thing you know, your friends love you because they love you or they love you because you're paying them. And that money can really contaminate those relationships.
Oh, that's unfortunate, right? It's a consequence of growth. I mean, unfortunately. So it sounds like you and your wife sort of complement each other. That's what sounds really kind of healthy.
Very much so.
Yeah. So it's not like there's not a clash, but there's a complementary thing going on, right? Where you're this, you have your seat on the bus, she has her seat on the bus, and together you're rubbing a really big boat with a lot of people, right? Helping. So if there's the vast majority of listeners in this podcast have not achieved a 250 person firm. I know you did probably a trillion things to get there. I know you did, right? Because I know this is hard as hell. Were there a couple moves you made, which looking back, you think you can look and say that really propelled me? That was sort of a game changer. Are there any things that come to mind?
I can't tell you the things that propelled me, but I can tell you the big mistakes that you can avoid, right? So there's some big mistakes. First of all, the spouse relationship, right? This is, to me, like the number of lawyers who say, I could never work with my spouse. And my answer to that is always, I could never not work with my spouse, because, you have to be 100% aligned with your spouse. If you're trying to solve a problem in your marriage by working at a law firm, it will destroy your marriage, right? And if you're not 100% aligned with your spouse, if you're not, then you need to put some work in your marriage and figure out, work it out, because when you do get money, the marriage will end, so work out. Please hear me, people. If you've got an issue in your relationship, you need to work it out before you start pouring yourself into a firm, and align yourself. Make sure your wife is aligned with this, or your husband, if you're a woman, and see if they can help you. Like, I literally could not have done what I did without my wife. Like, we are 100% integrated. And do we fight about stuff? Yeah, we don't really yell, but we have disagreements. And fortunately, most of the time, we can easily come to an agreement. If
she's right. Happy wife, happy life.
She's right. No, my wife is, first of all, my wife has got amazing insight. I will defer to her often because I have a better analysis. She's got better intuition.
Oh,
And let's
yeah.
be honest, guys, women have better intuition. And
No
if I
doubt.
can't do something where I know compellingly,
There's no doubt.
intellectually, it's right, I'm going to go with her intuition.
100%.
And
All
like
day.
I see this with a lot of guys. They're like, they poo-poo their wives. I'm like, bro, she knows more than you do. She can
Oh,
read
yeah.
people like that.
That's
And
the way
we're
it
all
is.
trial lawyers. We think we can. Baloney. We don't know. Like, we can be snowed by people. We like everybody.
Women
Right?
see
And
they're just
so-
so they see things that guys don't see, and that's why my wife is like my advisor. It's like when she says go left, I'm like,
100%.
I'll go left because she's not going to mislead me. And that's
Right.
when you have
As
a
long as she's
partner.
loving you and you've tested the relationship and
Oh,
know that
yeah.
she's out for your
Oh
benefit.
man, she's been
Right.
through deep, stuff with me. But that's when I can trust. I have that rock because when you have that rock, you can really go somewhere in this life.
Right. For real. For sure. So the first thing is make sure your marriage is solid.
Yes.
I would actually say first thing is really make sure your faith is solid. Because there are sometimes, man, like you said, like when you want to shut it down, like you got to have faith, like you've got to believe. And I say this to my employees, I don't ever want to be a stumbling block for anybody towards faith. And so I want to say that as a kind of forewarning. But at the same time, like if you don't believe that there's a purpose bigger than you and it's just about you and your ego and your money or whatever it is, if you don't believe that you have a bigger purpose, you will get trampled when the attacks come. You're just going to. You've got to believe that something is bigger than you is calling you to something bigger. Like I really believe that I'm called to serve these people. I believe it 100%. I get a lot of that energy is from that. And so I think you got to sort out your faith, and you don't have to believe my faith, but have some faith, something bigger than you, right? So that's number one. I would say number two is the marriage, and then don't do dumb stuff. Because a lot of times people, when you're motivated by ego or money or whatever, you will want to take the short path. I can definitely tell you there were no short paths on the way to success. There were no short paths. When you say was there turbocharging? No. There were no short paths. I always was a little more conservative. I never like some of the high profile cases. Everybody always celebrates when they get the TV case. I've always found those cases are not good cases. They usually don't have enough insurance, and my TV cases have been disasters. And then when you can't deliver, then God forbid you got a reporter on your butt who's saying, why didn't you get more than $10,000 for this brain injury? Sure. Those kinds of cases. So I give me $100,000 cases and not one, $500 million case. I'll take the smaller cases just in general because I can do more good for more people, I think. So there's no shortcuts on the way to success. And, don't look for those shortcuts. And when I say don't do dumb stuff, like if you want to get into advertising, people will sell you anything and they're going to tell you how it's all amazing and it's going to change your life. And 9.5 times out of 10, they're just dead wrong. Mm-hmm. The 0.5 out of 10 do more of that, right? So you got to track your advertising. Like there's this thing now, and I just disagree with some of my brothers and sisters at the 10 million plus level. Like a lot of these guys hire one agency and they don't even really track it that much, and they just have and they're like, oh, our cases are going up, so that's okay. I track everything. And if somebody comes in, an ad agency comes in and says we can't track everything, I mean, you can track social media easy. But like TV commercials, radio, all that stuff, if you don't know where everything is coming from and what effect it's going to have to me, and I built complicated machinery to do that, like we'll test the number, we'll do a call on a radio program and we'll see how many, we'll give away money and we'll say how many people call in at that time, right? That's what I did early on. And it was like $100, $500, whatever. Like, let's see how many, if are they an engaged audience? Because you can have, ratings out the butt, but if they're not really paying attention, forget it. And so if that was what we did early on. We don't do that anymore. We did that early on so we could test this media. And they're always going to tell you it's amazing. It's the highest ranked station. Therefore, you should pay the most. And they put you in the worst possible spots, 3:00 in the afternoon, on radio or whatever. You're just going to die. 3:00 Friday or 3:00 Saturday radio. Even worse. Nobody's listening at 3:00 Saturday. So we test that stuff. So don't do dumb stuff. Like just get your value and don't be afraid to ask for value, because we want to, when you become a businessman, you want to be honored as a businessman, and you think no one's going to try and pull one over on me. Listen, man, I run a big company and I got people trying to pull stuff over on me all the time. And my wife laughs because she's like, who have you become? We had a mortgage lender the other day and they said something and they changed the story in the second meeting. And I said, well, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to go forward because you changed your story. You violated your commitment to me already. And I don't do business with people who do that.
Wow, yeah.
And I hung up the phone, and my wife was like, who are you? And I said, well, I know what happens because when they twisted this, the next step is going to be the bank is going to jam a rod up my posterior the day before closing, and they think they can get away with it. And so I'm going to be very clear. If I ever do business with this person again, they're going to know I don't get fooled around with.
You can't mess around.
Yeah, you can't mess around. You got to. So demand success for yourself because you have a calling. And then lastly, I think the most important thing to most PI lawyers I can say is, man, every dollar matters for your clients. Like every dollar. We all have, I don't have any of my fancy watches on now, but we all have, like, for us, we're successful. We come from, even if we struggle, we still get to a level of success. When you graduate from law school, you're a lawyer, you're the top of the food chain, just graduating from law school and passing the bar.
Yeah.
Our clients who are trusting us, like a dollar matters for them. I'll finish with it. My wife tells a story when she was in law school. She pulled up at a gas station. She was driving home from school. She always had trouble getting money for gas, but at this time she was 1 penny short to buy a Diet Coke at a gas station. She wanted a Diet Coke that day. She was so thirsty. And so she goes into the thing, she tries to get the Diet Coke. She's a penny short. And the jerk behind the counter had said, "No, I'm not going to sell it to you." And she went around the parking lot looking for a penny on the floor. She couldn't find one. Wow. She was digging around in her car, couldn't find one. My wife remembers that story for her clients because a penny mattered for her that day. So when we fight for our clients, the penny matters.
Yeah.
And I tell this to my lawyers. They're like, "Oh, the adjuster was reasonable. What's another $1,000?" It's like, another $1,000 for these people, it matters to them. It matters to them. Go back and get the $1,000, because they have it and the injury is supported. And I don't care how nice the guy is being to you, get the money because it matters to my client, and so we got to remember that as lawyers, like it matters to them. And maybe they're going to give you a bad Google review. I don't know, man, but you got to do what's right for you, which is fighting for them because they trust you to do it. And man, I just can say it again, every dollar matters. If your clients are like my clients, every dollar matters.
100%. Yeah. Many Spanish speaking clients, English speaking clients, it doesn't matter, right? They all, a lot of them just need that extra dollar. So the thing I hear from you that I'm really, really interested in is like, you're not chasing money. You're just like chasing your passion of service. It sounds like, right?
That's right.
You're not looking for a buck. And I feel like the most successful people, and I've said this many times, don't chase money.
Yeah.
They're not. They're actually like chasing something bigger and better and deeper, which, sounds like service, faith-based service. That's meaningful work. That's service-based work, right?
Right.
And that's how you run the organization. It looks like that's how you're clearly doing things on a different level. I think that's awesome. So many lawyers are chasing money, man.
Yeah, and I was too, man. Let me not speak bad about other lawyers. Me too. I was chasing money. That moment of my spiritual conversion where I had no money, right? And I had this thing where I felt like God wanted more from me. Then that's where I had this, and then it became about the service, and I fell in love with my clients. Like I was always in love with my clients, and I always had a soft spot for immigrants in this country, going back to even when I was in high school. But like I just said, you know what? We're just going to do the most we can do for these beautiful people. And I go to churches and these people where they were just loving people, and they were always so supportive and loving, and they just had. And I'm like, these are real people who really love and are just trying to get better for their families, and they get hurt. If you're a construction worker and you hurt your shoulder, you're screwed. You're a housekeeper, worse. You hurt your shoulder, you can't clean. Yeah. You're going to lose your home. That's it. And so I want to serve those people, and as if they were even my own family. And so that's the money, as I say, is a barometer. It's a like a result. It's not what you chase. But that doesn't mean that the money's not important, because I do tell my people, get as much money as you can, because it does matter to them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we use it as a tool to measure, but it's just not the result. Once, and you talk to lawyers, it's the stuff is fun to get the first time. You get the Lamborghini, you get the Rolex, you get the the beachfront property, whatever it is. That's all fun the first time, and then it just wears off. It wears off, and I have other friends who they were happy having 3 or 4 Ferraris. I just I'd rather give some money to charity. We're building a church in the DR right now. We're building an orphanage in Nicaragua. That's
awesome.
I get choked up now. Like I see these little kids who aren't eating. Like in Venezuela, the kids have no food. Like we feed these kids. Like that's what matters to me.
I love it.
Trying to do those things, give back to those kids, because they don't have a shot if it's not for us.
Yeah, man. That's awesome. I love that. That's deep. That's next level. I hope people are really, writing this stuff down, because that's bigger living. That's a deeper living.
Well, and listen, I have the benefit of, I'm in my 50s now. Like I didn't believe this when I was in my 30s, but I think the faster you get here, the better you're going to be. That's what my point is. Like, I think this is for everybody. Just try and work towards this in your 30s and 40s, because I didn't learn this until I was in my mid 40s. And
that's
after
where I am.
that,
No, that's where I am. But success does leave clues, right? They say,
Right.
and it's true. And I admit deeply in my mid 40s right now, it's like, I was chasing money for so long, Greg, and that's a vacuous, empty pursuit.
Yeah.
You're never
It's
satisfied.
vanity. The Bible calls it
Yeah.
vanity.
Yeah,
Right.
just shallow, empty. But like something different, something like really meaningful. And that's fun. That's cool. That gets me jazzed up. So I want to be respectful of your time. Just a few more kind of quick hitting questions. When it comes to your business, and you don't have to get super deep on this, but is there anything in particular that keeps you up at night? So like anything that's sort of like is a nagging issue at that level of scale that you deal with.
And we've overcome so many problems. Like I just feel like we could overcome all the problems. I mean, there are some areas of discomfort.
Yeah.
I get, you know what really bothers me? I tell you what keeps me up at night. I have an answer for this. When I know that somebody has a tremendous amount of potential and they're not meeting their potential, and I don't know how to get them to meet their potential. When I know somebody has an amazing calling on their life and they can do amazing things, and I believe in them more than they believe in themselves, that keeps me up at night. When I see somebody acting out or somebody going through a meltdown because they're overwhelmed, and if they could just see in themselves what I see in them, like they would never let themselves get that upset about this stuff, So bringing out the best potential that people have, it keeps me up at night. I talk to my wife about it. Like if we have somebody who's struggling, it bothers me. I want to help them be their best potential, and it could be a receptionist, it could be lower, quote unquote, lower level employees. I mean, I want everybody to be their very best. And I was on the bottom one time, and I wish some people would look down and said, hey, you know what? Let me help him, give him a pull up. And tell him how good he is. Because when I was in high school and stuff, nobody was telling me, hey, you're great, So that does keep me up at night. But that's not a macro issue. That's an interpersonal issue.
Yeah. So I love what you're doing. Obviously, you're an easy guy to find online. But if people want to reach out to you, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah. So my website is 855-DOLOR, DOLOR 55.com. That's my firm website, 855-DOLOR.com. Attorney Greg Ward or Gregory Ward on LinkedIn. And Instagram is Attorney Greg Ward. I do motivational Mondays. I always have like a minute or two on like whatever issue. We have 7 core values, and I try and talk about one of those core values each week. Service to the client, service to the team, service to our community, faith, leadership, loyalty, and accountability. And so we're always talking about one of those topics every week, and we celebrate those when people have breakthroughs in those areas, and what those things mean to me and to us, and our core values are really what drive the culture. So we're excited to share that. And so Attorney Greg Ward on Instagram, LinkedIn, Greg Ward, and our website, 855-DOLOR, DOLOR 55, no spaces, no dashes, no dots. And that's our phone number too, if you ever need to reach us. 855-DOLOR 55. DOLOR means pain in Spanish. So that's what we came up with.
First of all, I love the Motivation Monday. So is that a company-wide thing that you do?
Every Monday, we have a firm huddle. So this is something Vern Harnish talks about. You have daily huddles. Every day we have top-down huddles. So I say top-down, meaning it's, but we start with the manager huddle, and then every manager has their own team huddle. So we will communicate with the managers. Problems will be reported to the management team from other managers. If there's an issue that needs to be addressed, we 15 minutes every morning, and then they go to their teams and they have their 15-minute huddle. So every day we're having complete 360-degree communication within our organization. And then every week, between online, I come into my main office here in Miami Lakes, where I'm right now, and I have about, maybe 50 people here. And then we have all the people Zoom in online, and the other people from the other office. And we basically have, we give shout outs. We start off with birthdays, new hires introduce themselves. We do shout outs of success. I have everybody report back anything really amazing that happened, a value that was honored that week. And we give shout outs. We give away like merch, like the Word Law Group shirts. We have a bunch of different shirts we give away for people to get shout outs. And then I'll go into, my huddle topic, which is usually 5 to 15 minutes of a topic. Like this last week, we did leadership. Everybody always wants to be in leadership in your organization. And I say, well, there's 3 leadership styles really existing in business today. There's a traditional leadership style, there's modern and postmodern. And you'll find traditional leadership style in organizations like the military and prisons and the government, where it's top down and the guy at the top makes all the calls. The postmodern you'll find in places like Google, where they're very collaborative. There is no team structure really. They all kind of sit around and noodle the problems. And the traditional and the postmodern all have challenges, for right reason. And then the other style, which I am, is a modern style, which is, you do have a hierarchical structure, but you're also very collaborative. and you get inputs from team members and you try and build consensus. It's not as diffused as the postmodern style. So I'm modern leaning traditional. My wife is modern leaning postmodern. And so when we come together, my wife does the marketing. A lot of marketing people are postmodern. They like that postmodern style with no hierarchies, and they all just, brainstorm things. What's the point of all this? I'm going to do the video. I'm going to put it up on our LinkedIn hiring page because I want people, when they apply to us, to know what our leadership style is. If you're postmodern and you're applying for something besides marketing, it's not going to work because you've got to follow our systems and processes, and you're going to have a voice, but it's not going to be, now I'm not going to be the jerk who's telling you what to do every day. We don't like micromanagers either. And so, people have to be intentional about what leadership style they follow, and the people in my organization need to know what their leadership style is. I have found traditional leadership styles where people think they become a leader and then they start telling everybody what to do. That does not work in my organization.
No,
they fail.
Healthy. Yeah.
It's not healthy. So for me, it doesn't work because you got to be, innovative companies you just can't be traditional leadership style. So we regulate it and we have processes, but, people have a voice for improvement. And so I put it on LinkedIn because I want people to, hey, you never thought about leadership like that. Nobody knows these styles, and you get into an organization. I've been in organizations that's traditional and I die in that organization, man. I'm modern. I gotta have a voice. I gotta have a say, and I want everyone to know where we stand. If you're postmodern, you're applying to, my reductions team or my, as you're an attorney, forget it. You're just not going to work here. It's okay. There's a place for you. Just not here.
Work here.
Yeah.
I love what you're doing, man. Super impressed. Thanks for your time. I know this is value packed, so thank you very much. Love all you're doing. Love the energy. Don't stop. I think you're only getting started at this point, so keep it going, man.
I feel like it.
All right, that's it for this episode of The Earley Show. Be sure to check out more episodes of our show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the Answering Legal YouTube channel.